Kia ora and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Kathy O'Sullivan, the editor for CIO New Zealand, and I'm delighted to welcome my first guest for 2023, Fred Lowry, who is the Chief Digital Officer at TAB New Zealand. Hello, Fred. How are you doing?
Kia ora, Kathy. How are you? Yeah, great. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Good. Happy New Year. Hope it's off to a good start. So you took up the role of Chief Digital Officer at TAB last year. Can you tell us a little bit more about the organization and what your team looks after?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, I took on the role as Chief Digital Officer back in August 2022. And in a nutshell, I am responsible for the digital experience and the technology aspect at TAB New Zealand. So we look after architecture, security, infrastructure, operations, delivery, testing, the full digital spectrum.
So it's a big role and a very fascinating organization. And you know, a lot of chief digital officers, CIOs, are undergoing transformation right now. And the word transformation is thrown around as if it's a given, but you know, in reality, it's hard yakka. It can be hard to do. Can you talk us through how that approach has taken shape in your own career? I know you've worked at organizations like Air New Zealand, Visa, Fonterra. How has transformation taken shape throughout those roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously, you know, really the last few years, it feels like transformation has been forced upon us. And I think we may talk about that a bit later in the interview. But really, I liken transformation to steering a ship or an oil tanker, if you want. First of all, the bigger the ship, the longer it takes to transform, but the greater the reward. And really, I think to go through a transformation process, you need a strong captain, but you need that captain to be surrounded by great leaders and change agents and people that are not afraid to fail along the way and to lead their own people through that transformation. The other aspect for me is, you need to have a unwavering belief in what you do. And if you are confident in the direction you are taking, then your team will as well.
But you know, as you mentioned, you know, steering that oil tanker, steering a ship, it can be hard to do. And what kind of challenges, or what are some of the kind of common roadblocks that have come up along the way, and what can you do to avoid them?
Yes, I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of people are falling into is they tend to look at the blockers or the constraints first. And for me, transformation, the first thing you need to do as a leader is really define what your end product or experience first. So you need to define what your North Star is, and really in an ideal world or without any constraints. And then you need to peel it right back. So you need to think, 3, 5, 10 years ahead, whatever your horizon is, define and have a clear idea of what you want that end product or experience be, and then make your plan accordingly. And some of the pitfalls I've seen, and even myself, I've gone through that in my career, is, some people tend to think about the blockers or the constraints first. So they think, I will not have the budget to transform. We've got too much technical debt. I don't have the right talent. But the problem, if you think about the constraints first, is it does hinder your ability to innovate and to think outside the box. So one of the thing I've learned along the way is, for any transformation, you need to think about your North Star or your end product or experience first, and then peel it right back and make your plan accordingly.
Yeah, I've heard the IT department being described as the department of no, and it's good that you're looking at it from that point of view and what can be achieved, rather than just focusing always on the pitfalls. So I'm curious then, Fred, what's your view of transformation? Do you think it's just something that's ongoing within any organization, or should there be an end date to transformation? Do you like to see transformation as a project with milestones and deadlines and, celebrating the wins along the way? Or is it just something that goes on and on and on?
So there's a lot of aspect to that question. I think, my first answer is, I don't believe there is a end date to transformation, for the very simple reason that technology always changes. So the tech always evolves and changes. So I think you need to have your North Star defined and understand where you want to be, but you need to be able to change tech if need be. You know, what you think your end product will be in 3 years' time, it's very unlikely to be what you think it will be. And the other thing is you need to be able to, what we call pivot, which is a buzzword nowadays, but you need to be able to evolve and change your views. So I think for me, transformation never ends for the very simple reason that technology always changes. The trends always change. You've got new technology coming in. You've got new drivers coming in. You've got, you've got curveballs, COVID being one of them, for example. So you need to be able to adapt. Now, having said that, in some transformation, there are some aspects of transformation where you may need to take a more waterfall approach and clear milestones and a project. So overall, I would like to I'd like to think that transformation always is a constant nowadays. But throughout that transformation process, you may need to define some clear milestone and be able to operate in a more waterfall approach if you want clear milestone project based approach. Now you talk about celebration, whether that's a more agile ways of working or whether that's a waterfall project with set milestone and deadlines. And I think celebration needs to happen anyway. That's that's a great way to build the culture, and you'd rather do it a bit like a software development where you want to release at pace. I think celebration is something that needs to be done along the way. It may not be a big hoo-ha, but just rewarding people, thanking them for their effort throughout the process rather than waiting for the end of whatever project you've embarked on.
Absolutely. And it helps feed into that feeling that you've got progress along the way, right? That it's not just this one big mammoth thing, that you actually are making progress along the way. So then, Fred, as Chief Digital Officer, you mentioned at the outset, that you're really focused on digitizing TAB. Can you tell us a bit more about how you're collaborating and influencing the organization and its leadership team?
Yeah, I guess one of the things is, you need to acknowledge that people have different levels of digital or technology literacy. So a key one for me is to really understand where people are on that spectrum, and really work with them to understand what their own drivers are, how they see the power of digital and technology, and how they can make their life easier. So the key thing as a leader, whether that's at executive level or below, I guess the key thing is you need to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes and view the organization through their lens as well. So obviously the need of a CFO is very different to the need of a chief customer officer or myself. So empathy is a big thing for me, just being able to see the world through my peers or my direct, my people lens, be able to tailor my language to their level of digital understanding or digital literacy, and really kind of understand what's in it for them. As I said, for a CFO, that's about maximizing revenue, return on investment, productivity. For a chief customer officer, that'll be more about the customer experience and how to bring people through the door. So it's really about understanding their drivers and what's in it for them before defining your own strategy and how you can help them along the way.
Absolutely essential to collaborating and influencing. So you mentioned earlier, about transformation being forced on a lot of organizations, especially from the pandemic. So how do you think the role of CIO has changed since the pandemic?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Actually, beyond that, I think it's not about the role of the CIO. I think it's the role of technology. And I think this, pretty very bluntly, the pandemic just accelerated or forced companies to accelerate their digital transformation. So as I said earlier on, it really, because of the pandemic, transformation was just forced upon us. It did accelerate the move to more customers using digital offering, and in most cases, a significant drop in foot traffic. So I think what it forced companies to do is really to focus more heavily on the online channels as the foot traffic died down. And I can think of a number of examples. There's ourselves, of course. We've got a very wide retail network, but during COVID, people really had to change their habits and go from betting in a retail environment to betting through the website or through our mobile app. I can think of the supermarkets as well, which for most of them have done great work, actually changing the way they process orders and stuff like that. Banks as well. So I think you had seen in some industry prior to COVID, some level of transformation. Banking was one of them, but I think what the pandemic did is really forced us upon us, and we did not have the choice but to invest heavily in digital channels, because that was the only way to operate for close to 3 years, really. And I think what we've seen now is really we've seen a quite a change in habits, right? So the people that used to go to our retail stores, for example, now they haven't. Not all of them have returned to retail stores, and they're now really happy to put bets or through our apps or mobile channels. So yeah, I think the key thing is there's really we saw more digital transformation in just a few weeks that we would have done in years, and what it did is just forced us to innovate with quicker turnaround times, faster innovation, different ways of working, ability to work remotely. We've seen a number of trends that are accelerated. Remote working is one of them, of course, but we've seen a significant expansion to public cloud, which meant that business could operate with less fear of failure, for example. So I think, to go back to your question, I don't think that's about the role of the CIO. I think that's the role of technology. And as a CIO, this is my role to embrace that and just to make sure that we're at the front foot of that transformation.
Absolutely. And so then with, technology becoming such a focus and such a key part of any organization's success, what do you think are some of the key attributes of a successful modern day CIO when it comes to leadership?
Yeah. So not so long ago, I read an interview of Jason Ryan. I think he's the All Blacks forward coach, I think. And he said something along the lines of, the players don't really care what you know until they know how much you care. And I think this is a great analogy. I think the biggest talent for any leader is just a good attitude, just being a good person. And what, especially the last 3 years, which has seen, some people struggle through lockdown. So as a leader, really for me, it's about being caring, being open-minded, being empathetic, curious, and open to be challenged. And those are the leadership attributes I think are all valid. But I think the last 3 years that we've gone through really brought that to the fore. Because we did not have that face-to-face contact on a social aspect. So as a leader, there was time for all leaders to really step up and demonstrating empathy and make sure that checking on people's well-being. And so I think that's one of the positives for me of the last 3 years. It really brought that mental or personal well-being aspect to the forefront. We know some people struggle through lockdown, and as a leader, one of the good the big thing for me is just caring for my people, genuinely caring, and it's not fake, genuinely caring for my people, just checking in on them, and being open-minded. The other thing as a leader is really important to be not afraid to be challenged, not afraid to take risk. I said the world as it was 3-4 years ago is very different nowadays, and I think that's been a real eye-opener for a number of people, and certainly challenged some of the perception of the assumption that people had about the workplace or technology.
Indeed. And it is, a tight labor market out there. There is definitely a war for talent still going on. So how are you creating that internal culture at TAB that really helps your people thrive? You touched on it there a little bit about, caring for people, but how are you making sure that your people achieve their personal and professional goals?
Yeah, that's a very big point for me. Is I think personal development is at least as important as professional development. So one of the first things I'm keen to do is to make sure my people carve out some time for personal development. I can give you an example. A few years ago, one of my staff, she wanted to go back to university, but she was a mom. She didn't have the time outside of work to study. She was busy in the weekend, so what I said to her, I said, look, you know what? And it was before the pandemic where, Friday was, we had a lot of, some time downtime on Friday, but I told her straight away, I said, look, I think what you need time. And time is at the core of everything. So I said to her, you know what? We're going to carve out some time and I'll give you every Friday afternoon so you can focus on study. So I think it's about understanding where people are, where people want to go, and as I said, carving time and making time for your people, or giving them some time to grow is key, because we obviously in my role is it's 24/7, and time is it's quite a rare commodity, I would say. So carving out time, making time for your people. The other thing for me is when you talk about professional goals, is making sure there is a story to tell. So I am really big myself on full transparency. So even myself at TAB, I've talked about my goals with my with our CEOs or with my manager, but I've been really good at I've fully shared my goals with the wider digital population. There is nothing hidden. So I shared what my top 5 priorities are and what my measurable goals are, and I made sure that everyone in the digital organization understand their roles to play and make sure their goals are aligned to mine. So when it comes to professional goals, that's all about, I think, transparency and top-down approach, and making sure that people understand what their roles are and how they contribute to the North Star. And from a professional goal, that's understanding what people want to do outside of work, and making the space and giving them the space and the time to thrive.
So another important part of high-performing teams is diversity, and IT traditionally has not been great at encouraging people from different backgrounds to consider IT as a career. So what kind of practical things do you think can be done to get more people into IT that better reflect the out era that we live in?
Yes, so I think we need to go back to why we want diversity, because I think it's a term that's been been a lot, but I think the main purpose of bringing diversity in IT, whether it's about gender or background or ethnicity, whatever, is really to bring diversity of thoughts, experience, and opinion. And so for me, it's about bringing different perspectives and the ability to see the world through a different lens, which I think is actually the only way to get disrupted. So to put that in context, there are two things, or two. To me, there's gender diversity. We clearly the women are underrepresented in IT in the country, even though I think it's changing, and we see there's a lot of great women in technology nowadays. Obviously Vanessa Sorensen and Microsoft, and there's a number of CEOs and great leaders coming through, which is great. But I think there's a lot of stuff to be done to bring more women in that in IT or digital. The second aspect is around Maori and Pacifica, which I believe are probably such huge untapped talent or potential in Maori and Pacifica. So women and Maori and Pacifica, I think are two. I don't like using the word population, but people, we want people to come through because they will bring that type of diversity, whether that thoughts of opinions. So, which is great. For me, there's a number of things. There's been a lot of activities now, a lot of programs. I think Microsoft has got DigiGirls or 10K Wahine. I think AWS got Apori Wahine, I think it's called, or the Dream House for Pacifica and Maori. So the big organization like Microsoft or AWS are kind of leading the way, but that's after that it's up to us as a small organization, or to jump on the bandwagon and really support this organization and bring people. The other thing is around interns. So there's a number of things like Summer of Tech that really keen to support as well. So I think bringing people through internship program like Summer of Tech is great, and really just growing women to IT professionals or IT or digital leaders, as well as tapping into Maori and Pacifica are, I think, probably the best way for us to grow that talent, because I think every IT or digital leaders in the country, as you saw, it's really hard to find talent, and like you can't, especially at the moment with the immigration settings not fully fully relaxed. If you want, we still don't have the ability to recruit from overseas. So, we could compete between ourselves and poach people from different organizations, but I don't think that's a healthy situation. So the only way we will solve that talent scarcity is really to grow our own talent. And I think between Woman and Maori and Pacifica, there's untapped potential in people we can grow to become outstanding IT professional or digital leaders.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a long game. There's no, unfortunately, there's no quick fix for that. So Fred, we all make mistakes in our jobs and in our careers. Are there any kind of mistakes that stand out for you that when you look back on them, they really shaped you as a leader?
Yep. First of all, it's okay to make mistakes. That's fine, and this is how we grow. Looking back at my career, I've not a lot of mistakes. I could spend days talking about them. But when I look at the person I was maybe 15 or 18 years ago, one of the big mistakes I was making at the start of my career is I was focusing on being busy rather than being productive. And so I can think of a few situations where I was close to burnout, and I was really working to do my hours as opposed to doing a good job. And therefore, looking back, my we talk a lot about my bucket, and my bucket was always between being empty and half full, but my bucket was never full. So I didn't learn about it the hard way, and the importance of looking after myself, whether that's emotionally, mentally, or physically. The importance of work-life balance, that comes with experience and maturity. But one of the big mistakes for me was really just I was, in some cases, my background being cybersecurity, I was involved in a number of big incidents 15 years ago, and some weeks it was 70 to 80 hours per week, sleeping at the office, and it's just not sustainable and not healthy. And I think as you grow and become more mature, you just realize that it's not sustainable, and then you shift your mindset from I want to be busy to actually I want to be productive. So it's about goal setting, checking in, having good support network, whether that's through your peers or your family or mentoring. So that was one of the biggest mistake for me, or just biggest learning curve is learning to be productive rather than being busy, and having the right pointers and support network in place to do that, and knowing myself and when to say stop and when to slow down to accelerate afterwards.
Absolutely, and great that you've learned from that experience, and that it has helped shape you and how to prioritize things. So then, Fred, what's the best career advice you've ever received?
Yeah, that's interesting. So actually, that's related to the situation I was talking about. And one day, I can think of that particular period of my life, or I think for a week I didn't go home. I was literally just sleeping at the office, working on. It was a high-profile security incident. I'm not going to go into details, but it was it's pretty full on. And the week after, I still hadn't recovered emotionally. I was really tired, and someone told me, you know what, it's just work. And that was the best piece of. It was actually a real eye opener for me, because. Yes, at the end of the day, it's just work. I mean, I love what I do. I'm really passionate, and sometimes there's some days where I will put in the hours and work long hours. But at the end of the day, this is just work, and that's the kind of thing you learn through experience. You learn through failures. You learn through making mistakes. But yes, it's just work. And I think one of the biggest. I think that's Confucius said one day that you need to choose a job you love, and you will never have to work a day in your life. And I think that's the best thing. I find my niche in IT and digital, and I love what I do. I love the people I work with. I love the industry. But the key thing for me is you just gotta love what you do. There is no point getting up in the morning and if going to work is a chore, then you're just in the wrong line of work, right? So biggest thing for me is it's just work, and if you can find any job that you love, then just stick to it and fuel your passion. And that's the best way to be in the right mindset.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Great career advice. It's just work. And finally, economic uncertainty. There's a tight labor market and rising technology costs. They're just some of the headwinds facing the industry this year. So can you tell us what's important to you in the months ahead?
Yes, a few things. I guess for me, I've been with TAB, 5-6 months now. So really, the priority is to set up my team and set it up for success. So we've got a high level plan or high level strategy, but we're about to recruit, or we've recruited a number of key roles in my team. So as a matter of fact, just one of our new head of started yesterday. I've got a new person starting in a couple of weeks. So in the short term, that's really about setting up the team for success. Providing them with the right framework and goals and North Star that people are all steering the ship in the right direction. That's number one. And as a business for TAB, that's about negotiating the headwinds. We know from an economic point of view, we're going to turn our 2023 is I suppose it's going to be a tough year from an economic point of view. So as a business, that's really about shaping up the business to make sure that we are right sized and right shape to negotiate the headwinds that we're about to face in the next 12 to 24 months.
Well, we look forward to seeing your team thrive and succeed with all of those goals. Fred Lowry, Chief Digital Officer at TAB New Zealand, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kathy.